everyone. Thanks, Mindy. They told me to talk really loudly, but I think maybe that was a little too loud. So I'm presenting today what I think might be my 50th edit of this presentation, The Happy Medium. So I hope you enjoy. I would like to first acknowledge and pay my respect to the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of this land. 2 years ago, I stopped by a smoking ceremony in my neighbourhood. I sat by the side of the road, watching, and as I did so, the elders' curiosity about my heritage led to a shared connection, his ancestors and mine. I had no idea prior to that moment that there was any history linking ancient Egyptians and Australia. The experience gave me a real feeling of belonging, one I craved growing up. A sense of connection with my home and heritage. I am reminded of this often. The images I'm presenting are of the site in Durrang country in New South Wales, where hieroglyphics were discovered on a rock formation, with many claiming evidence that Egyptians had visited this site a long time ago. Mefish velus, la'a l'shen shandena, mefish wat. Translated, we have no money, we don't have the means, and we don't have the time. These statements were on constant repeat in my household. So I wasn't too surprised when I heard them again in my career. This time, it was the sounds of my stakeholders. Money was replaced with budget. Means was replaced with no resources. And time was replaced with deadlines. Growing up in my Tweedy era, as the eldest daughter of migrants in the outer suburbs of Sydney, my parents worked long and hard. They were also trying to live in a very unfamiliar environment. This meant a lot of uncertainty for them, fear of trying, and as a result, no was the answer to most things. I grew up learning to navigate around the constraints. No money? Fine. As soon as I was 14 and 5 months old, I began my long career as McDonald's drive-through chick. When told I couldn't play netball because they didn't have the time to drive me, which I was sure was a deterrent, I convinced my coach to pick me up instead. It was a constant battle, but it was the making of me. I became resilient to rejection and resourceful in my problem-solving abilities. I learnt to navigate my constraints pragmatically, so I could do whatever the heck I wanted. Eventually, I wore my parents down, with my 2 younger sisters the beneficiaries, inheriting much more reasonable parents as a result. So in the early 2000s, my accidental choice to enroll into design, a career I had never heard of until that moment, turned out to be a great match, despite struggling to comprehend a lot of the theory or master the tools. While my colleagues were obsessing with Adobe, I had no idea what it was. I graduated because that's what the eldest child of migrants must do. Most likely as a result of my childhood and my start in design and my innate pragmatism, I became passionate about making design useful. I made it approachable in the real world, often rejecting the theory and over-intellectualized concepts and focusing on the things that would get me to a good outcome quickly. So some years later, when my husband suggested that we should move to a farm, despite not having any experience, money, or time, I felt I had trained my whole life for this. This true story, and maybe a little insane, I hope will be evidence that you can do a lot with just a little. In our case, that meant starting a farm with not much at all. Over the years, I've worked in roles in both design and product management in a range of industries, and now lead a really awesome team of designers at TAFE New South Wales. I hope they're listening. No matter where I went, there was one thing in common: constraints. And our response seemed to either mean we over-engineered our process, feeling like the need to defend our work, or feeling like imposters, we relied on a process that felt scientific, fail-proof, so we could feel confident to progress. This resulted, I believe, in 2 different mindsets. The rigid, who sometimes sounded like this: I've explained that we need 12 weeks in research again, but my team and stakeholders aren't getting it. Or, we can't progress yet because we haven't tested with all the right personas. Or, I've not been able to spend enough time in research and synthesis, so I can't identify the opportunities. So fixed on the approach and process, lacking the ability to compromise, they lost sight of the goal. And the outcomes were slow to come and sometimes never at all. They've lost trust with their stakeholders and teams, and they were left feeling super angry. Alternatively, the disempowered, sounding more like this: we'll just do as we're told, as they won't listen anyway. Or, they won't give us any money for testing, so we won't do any at all. Or, I don't even understand the problem we're solving, so instead of asking why, I'll just design something anyway. They lost the motivation to drive change or take charge of the outcome. They ditched any design rigor and succumbed to the pressure of their constraints. They delivered things fast, but often lacking quality. And they were left feeling super deflated. I've been in these mindsets myself, either feeling deflated, disempowered, or feeling angry and rigid. And of course, the designer in me wanted to get you standing up and get feedback immediately about if this resonated, but maybe just come chat to me after, since we've probably just barely sat down. But yeah, keen to chat if any of this resonates with you. No matter which mindset, I believe we are coming across sometimes a little too needy or a little too preachy, and sometimes a bit showy. Along the way, we've lost the joy in design and the impact it can have to problem solve. It has often led us down the path of paralysis. The happy medium is where I believe we need to operate in, the balance between quality and speed, shifting our minds from needing permission, process, and perfection to simply getting things done good enough. This balance, I think, can be achieved through three key things: resilience, when hearing no, staying optimistic and driving change, perhaps despite of it; resourceful, when we don't have all the things, trying to be self-sufficient; and pragmatic in what we deliver, designing in the realm of possibility. So when my husband Benjamin, who's in the audience today, a trader, became obsessed with sustainable farming and actively tried to convince me to ditch our inner city lifestyle and stable incomes to move to a farm, I had to check myself. The closest thing either of us had gotten to a farm is evidenced in some of these photos. Here I am, stopped on the side of a road taking a photo with 3 cows, I think, us drinking wine on a farm, and a few times we did glamp on a farm. This is in Jindabyne. Despite my initial apprehension, after some reflection, I realised what he was asking of me wasn't too dissimilar to any other design problem I had dealt with. Especially my time in agency, where every few months I was dropped into a new project in an unfamiliar industry, solving a new problem with an impossible deadline. So honestly, why not? It could be fun. And I was getting quite good at faking it until I made it. Here I am, as a 4-year-old, attempting to belly dance for the first time in Egypt. Apologies for the quality of this photo. This is my dad's 3rd attempt at uploading and sending it to me. I don't think he took it out of the plastic sleeve. I don't know why. So, we defined the terms of our experiment to ensure we found our happy medium. We would not sink too much money, we would maintain our day jobs, and we would remain living in the inner city. We were ready. Planning and research in unfamiliar territory. Most people we interacted with through this experience, as you can imagine, had a long line of history as farmers. It was really hard not to feel overwhelmed. But as we say, we needed to be comfortable in the uncomfortable. For us, that meant being resilient. A good plan would ground us. So off I went in full product management mode. I rummaged through our house in search for leftover system cards, post-its, Sharpies, and a bit of tape. Our kitchen wall took our new role. It was a full-scale roadmap. Benjamin carted up everything that he knew and all the things we didn't know. From there, we defined our actions, our tasks, and we delegated work. After a few hours of planning, it was pretty evident, after a glass or 2 of wine, we didn't need any more theory. What we needed was to get ourselves on a real farm ASAP. Luckily, we had a lead. After some Facebook group joins, we found someone who followed our ethos, was our age and lived in New South Wales. Enter Farmer Shannon in our life. He agreed on a barter. He would share his home, knowledge, and time in exchange for labour. By day, Benjamin farmed, definitely not I, and by night he documented the learnings. In less than 1 month, we'd gone from glampers to an actual farm. It had supercharged our progress, helping us identify real opportunities, and most of all, Shannon gave us the confidence to proceed. So on Benjamin's return, he came back with 3 things. 1, further obsessed with farming. 2, an identified experiment. We would produce chickens to sell. Supposedly, they're a good beginner animal to get started versus a cow, for example. And we didn't need a lot of resources to get started. And Shannon also shared some personal advice with us that we should probably get started on baby making as we need all the help we could get on the farm. We decided to pass on that for the time being. We were eager to begin, but we weren't yet sure if our experiment would succeed. I mean, we could probably raise and produce chickens, but would our customers want to buy them? What is the most important thing we need to learn right now? Last week, that very question had my team stopping an experiment, as the remaining risks were so tiny, there was no need to test again. They went straight into design. This question I ask often, I think grounds our research to reality. What does it actually mean? Do we actually need to do this? So off Ben and I went to search in finding our customer. The weekend farmers market was the obvious place to find them. That's where all inner city folk go to buy farm fresh goods. Our aim was to understand people's motivation and if our ethos would resonate. So I put my graphic design skills to work. I made a beautiful flyer. I went to my parents' house to print it, because we definitely didn't have a printer. And we went to seek feedback, both from farmers and potential customers. We needed to understand how, what, and why they might buy from us, and a potential price point. This was our happy medium. It was essentially a lo-fi test that was minimal effort and cost, but it gave us just enough to move forward. When imagining the rigid's response here, it would likely be that they might still be stuck in the unknowns. The disempowered, despite wanting to do research, may have already moved into attempting to start producing their full-blown experiment. Trust your gut, build confidence as you go. You don't need it right at the start. Don't let it stop you. Experimentation when you have little money or time. When your idea is really tactile, like attempting to farm chickens, you are somewhat forced into resourcefulness. Others' trash was our treasure. It seemed you could find almost anything free and cheap. I've made the point already that we all work with some level of constraint. Even as a design leader, that's true. So my preference is always to be self-sufficient where possible. But what can we do with what we already have? The other day, we got stuck with a similar problem where the team that owns the list for us to recruit our customers told us they could no longer provide it for us. I can't explain, some kind of new privacy law. So instead, our team just devised a way to recruit for ourselves. We made a poster, stuck a QR code on it, and we posted it all over our campuses and almost immediately got a response. So when Benjamin and I began our experiment, we had to ask ourselves the same question. How might we use what we already have? I know it's very unlikely that our retired, non-designer Sydney landlord is in the audience today, but just in case, I'm sorry for what you're about to see. Enter our first act of resourcefulness. Repurposing our garage into a home. It was temporary, but it worked. It was about this time, as I was scooping chicken poo very early one morning, that I began questioning my life choices. Whilst they were cute and it was convenient, our core ethos was having the chicks out roaming in the sun. They needed an upgrade ASAP. We found a willing party, my best friend's mum. She lived on the outskirts of Sydney and was kind enough to say yes. So began the impossible task of trying to fit 28 full-grown chickens in our tiny VW Golf. It was chaos, and it resulted in many trips back to get the car cleaned. We could not get the stink out. Whilst the farm was free, it still meant a daily commute of over 2 hours to ensure our chickens were looked after. Needless to say, whilst Benjamin was farming, I somehow transitioned into an inner city farmer's wife, ensuring on his return he had a hot meal, warm and clean home, and I even began baking. And I did even consider pickling vegetables. It somehow felt very appropriate. In less than 7 weeks, we were going to have 28 chickens ready to sell. We needed customers interested in eating our chickens in exchange for feedback. Surprisingly, that was the easiest part for us. It seemed people had bought into our mission, or perhaps it was just curiosity. For us, the happy medium was starting despite not having a home for the chicks or any know-how really to take care of them. We had to learn a lot of that as we went. I think the rigid in this phase, would have refused to start the experiment until they understood everything about the farm and they had all the resources ready to get started. And perhaps the disempowered, not being sure, would have likely neared the end of the experiment without full confidence. Don't let a lack of knowledge or resources stop you from experimenting. The conditions are rarely perfect. Lastly, delivery. The experiment was a personal one, so it was harder to be pragmatic, but even more important to understand if this idea would be feasible. After all, it would be our whole life that could change based on the outcome of this experiment. Unbelievably, we had produced 28 healthy chickens on our first attempt at farming. We had stuck to our budget and timeframes. We were still happily married and living in the inner city, and the feedback from our customers was positive. Most even said they'd pay a lot more than they would for supermarket chicken. Whilst our job is to design experiences for our customers, we often get lost in imagining the ideal state, and we forget to take into account some of the realities of delivering it for real. It's a common thing I see. It reminds me of a couple of years ago when a designer came and presented me the most beautiful personalised dashboard, which I knew would solve our customers' problems. But what she hadn't done was take into account the fact that data and identity in our organisation had some real issues. It meant what was presented was years away from reality. Ask yourself, is it possible? I'm not saying we shouldn't design the ideal, but then also ensure you look at a solution that's possible soon. So for us, despite a successful experiment, we still weren't sure if it was possible for us. Could it fund our lifestyle? And whilst fun the first time, was it enough to uproot our life? So we made our second crazy decision for that year to produce batch 2 of our chickens. We wanted to see if we could get paying customers and understand if it was still enjoyable the second time round. We also reviewed our feedback and our processes and made it a bit more efficient the second time around. The happy medium in this phase was being pragmatic with our results. It would have been super easy to just say, yep, it's validated, let's go buy a farm. The rigid in this case, I think, would have likely wanted to experiment again, but this time even more complex. And the disempowered, I imagine, may likely have seen a failed attempt at their farm. Having clear goals and understanding your context allows you to check that your experiment met them and that it helps you define your next steps. So I'm certain, since Simon's talk, your curiosity is now at a peak. You're needing to know the results of our farm. We did not end up living on a farm. Despite 2 successful experiments and having produced over 60 chickens and all finding a happy home, and we even managed to sell our second batch to real paying customers, it seemed I loved my life too much and I did fear the lack of the stability that the farm would bring to us. I'm still a designer, obviously, and Benjamin found his new happy. He made the change he was after. He's now almost a psychologist. And instead of baby chicks, we're raising 2 baby girls. Definitely not in our garage. And if this has inspired you to start your own farm, I've prepared a beginner's guide for you, a one-pager. The 3 simple steps to starting your own farm. Perhaps also find a willing participant. For the rest of you, here are the 3 simple principles to the happy medium. I think they can be used on absolutely anything in your everyday. Be resilient when planning, just enough to move forward, and ask yourself, what is the most important thing we need to learn right now? Resourceful when experimenting. Don't let a lack of resources or knowledge stop you. And ask, but what can I do using what we already have? And pragmatic in our decision making. Experiment with something that is within the realm of your reality and ask, but is it possible? And if nothing else, I hope today is a reminder that you can do a lot with a little. And in the words of my family, Efrahi, go out, find your joy, happiness, pleasure, and delight. And I hope my story delivered some of that for you today. Thank you.